This session is the second last, the penultimate session of the India Retail Forum. And we've been talking a lot over the last 2 days about retail industry, a lot of micro details, the minutiae about how online retailing is going to change the future of retail, what are the new trends in retail, the real estate aspects. But one reason why India Retail Forum works out really well is because eventually it tries to squeeze out the main macro trends. And I think this session, with the three names I have, I can guarantee you from what little I've learned over the last few years, is that if you really want to get or cut through the noise and really figure out the big trends, the three faces here have shaped retail in India in some ways, and they are the ones who will be carrying the torch of redefining retail. It is not just about technology, but actually spotting consumer trends, spotting new trends in the way real estate will interplay with retail. Three of them need no introduction, but for the sake of the audience, once again, to my immediate left is Rakesh Biani. He's the joint MD of Future Retail. For those of you who are here, could you give a round of applause to welcome him? Rakesh Biani is behind one of the biggest retail groups in the country. Nikhil Chaturvedi, we had the fashion session before, but anybody who defined fashion to begin with in this country, it was Nikhil's Provoke brand, and as growing up kids, that used to be the aspirational brand. So I'm sure kids are still looking forward to that. And Rakshit represents a brand which I think every man, woman, especially in the north, aspire to have. He's the MD of Nivea in India, and they have an interesting range of products and innovating as well. This session's topic is about management thinking, innovation, building scale, and globalization. Rakeshji, I will start with you. You were here yesterday when we had a very slightly, I would say, noisy discussion about online, offline. Nagesh tried to put everybody on the mat by saying, okay, which is your favorite online store, and the online guy, which is your favorite offline store. But I think retail goes beyond the delivery mechanism. There is a lot more to retail. My question to you would be, for those who are looking at it futuristically, how much more money there is left to be made in this industry? Because we have really touched a sliver of what the Indian consumer is about.
Well, I think, we've just about made a beginning in terms of what we're able to take out of the customer today. And I think even if you look at today, from what the customer used to consume in the past, and as every year goes by, and as there is more money with the customer, there's more knowledge with the customer, more exposure to the customer is asking for more and more choice. And every choice is leading to an expansion in the category and expansion in consumption. And this journey is just about started. In fact, we were trying to just think through is that when you go into a store in India, and what is the choice of assortment that is readily available to make a choice from. And earlier, if there were about 5 SKUs in a particular category or 6 SKUs, today we may have reached to about 16, 20. But in a very evolved market, this choice is going on to maybe even 100. And this 100 is also within certain price point. And then there is, of course, the higher price point, the premium products, and then the luxury products. So the landscape is too large. And this landscape is going to be powered by the Indian consumer. Yes, it's a 1.3 billion population, but maybe 200 million of them are currently consuming. It's a very small portion of it, and that's the reason whenever you look at India's per capita consumption, across every category, we are among the bottommost countries. Now, what is going to happen is the fact that if India continues to grow, and which means if when India grows continuously, there is more money with people, and when there is more money, there is going to be a tendency to go and spend more. And when you're going to go and spend in the new India that is going to emerge, which is a digitally well-informed Indians, exposure across all kinds of influencers, international television, domestic television, Bollywood movies, international movies, all these are influencers, and the customer is going to start asking for many more products, many more categories, and many more niches will keep evolving. I don't think so we have even there in any category-specific retail. What is happening today is very broad-based retail in India, broad-based trading. there are specialists to emerge, and within specialists there are category killers and there are category experts. It's just so much more to still happen here.
So the game has just begun. You used the interesting word, the choice game. Nikhil, let me ask you, you traditionally the kind of genre of retail that you came from, just having a new brand in itself was a big deal. Now we have many more choices there. This choice game, do you really think organized retail can capitalize in this opportunity? Because eventually, you really don't want to stumble upon the next big idea. Because as he said, the numbers are there to see. The data access is going to make a consumer more learned, more knowledgeable. Where do you see the potential of Indian retailers meeting up with that challenge?
No, I think this is, whether we were talking about 2001 or 2002 or 2003 and what we're talking about in 13, 14, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the consumption story. When the retail story was extremely big, everyone said, last man standing, whoever has largest market share will be rewarded the largest. Today, there's a different medium for selling the same merchandise which has come in. So are these new mediums not selling the same merchandise? They're selling the same merchandise. The first round of retailers came in and developed a whole bunch of suppliers and vendors because the market wasn't organized. The online retailers are coming and doing the same. Ultimately, it is the Indian consumption story which is winning. And the way I see it is that as long as we are focused on the Indian consumption story, so whether as a brand, earlier I was selling through my own store, multi-brand outlets, whatever. Today I'm selling through e-commerce. So from our perspective, what we're trying to see is, as long as we are focused on the consumption story and we are able to capitalize on whatever big opportunity is coming our way, I think we should be fine.
No, but playing the choice game takes a different niche. I mean, as Rakeshji said, Indian retailers have to spot that niche. Somewhere you have to also create a new market. Do you see that push happening, that aggression there? Because right now, I can turn around and say, look, the numbers are so big, anything, kuch bhi banao bikta hai. So the question is, eventually to develop that specialty, that niche, do you think we really need to begin right now, or we can just wait till that market evolves in the country?
No, you can't wait for anything. But we have to see it from the perspective of what were the challenges of retail. The biggest challenge of retail was physical space. The biggest challenge of retail was the way India is constituted. We have 17% of the world's population, but only 3% of the land mass. So, and because of our social security not being there, whatever, real estate has been traditionally expensive. And hence, whatever e-commerce is doing in India is being rewarded in a much larger way than whatever hard commerce is. But you need to understand that there are growth funds and there is stabilized funds. The stabilized funds back the companies which are there. That's why, just to give you a very simple example, the value of Amazon was 120 billion when their sales was 20 billion. When their sales reached 85 billion, their value increased from 120 billion to 160 billion. So $60 billion of additional sales increased their value by $40 billion. So there's a growth phase which goes on, which India is going through, and it is rewarding. And these things will change. They tend to stabilize with time. And we have to be focused on spotting the next opportunity. This opportunity is here, and now it will stabilize, I believe.
All right. Rakeshji has a slightly counter, I guess, to that.
Not a counter. I just want to build on to the choice story, and I'll give you an example of something that we did over the last 1 year. And we have a store in Hyderabad. It's a very oversized store, and we were kind of struggling with that particular store. It's a big bazaar store. We were struggling with it. It was an amazing location, and we've been over the first 5 years of that store. We kept trying a lot of things, etc. But nothing's ever seemed to have worked. So last year in March, we were there together, and we said the fact that we're going to make this the choice store. And this has got to be the store where every single category will be celebrating assortment. Yeah? It's got to be the widest choice of assortment across every single product category that we are going to do. And this was about thinking that everything needs to be 3x the size of whatever I'm used to doing. Because I had the space, I had everything in place. So what we did is the fact that a clothing store, where typically on an average we carried about 100,000 units in stock, We redefined our entire store. We converted it into a 40,000 square feet of clothing. Today we have 3.5 lakh garments to choose from at any point of time on display in that particular store. It's just a stunning amount of t-shirts on display. It's a stunning amount of shirts on display. You think about a product and it's actually available in that store. The result is this, that it is now going to be 100 crore clothing store alone in a single box. That was an unimaginable thing. It was actually just my existing store, existing stuff. Now, so when you simply question the fact that, are you really playing the choice game because the customer is looking for the choice? So we said we must try it out. It's a big risk, but we said we have to do it. Anyway, it's not making sense today. At least it will start making sense if it works. Now it has worked across that category. It's worked across the home category. We did the same thing. Talk about pressure cookers to choose from. That's a store where we offer you 120 pressure cookers to choose from. So I think the choice game works. This is just one store. Now I'm trying to think through the fact that, can I find 50 such locations in the country where I can do this job? The answer is, the probability is yes over a period of time.
Interesting. The choice game can be played very well in the Indian market. Rakshit, let me bring you in. You are in a product space which I would not say the limited choice, but there's enough competition within each category of product. And we were having a discussion before we came in here, and you were giving us insights into the rural market. Do you think the choice game is a metro-centric kind of an option versus the larger market is more about the pricing war or the kind of categorization of the same product that you can bring in?
The way to look at it is maybe slightly different. In the earlier days, when there were no supermarkets or when there was no modern trade, there was an oft-remained spoken word, which was that merchandising is the art of exposing the product so that you are putting at the risk of being sold. Now, what has happened is that over the last 10 to 15 years, we've had a media explosion. The internet has enabled the individual. From an earlier store, when there was only a traditional store, he could hardly see 5 packs or 10 packs, and he had to stand behind the counter and buy something. Modern trade gave him the chance that in about 1 hour or 2 hours, you can walk through the store and you can see 500 packs, you can see 10 different SKUs of the same product category. The internet has now made it possible that in half an hour, you can run through an assortment of, maybe 50 SKUs of the same brand group. So what has happened is that from a metro and a non-metro philosophy, because of the internet technology and media, because modern trades haven't really reached tier 3 India, while, so if I talk about urban India, which has 4,000 towns, leave that apart, talk about what you call as all India metro plus town class 1, which is about 400 towns. Not all the 400 towns have modern trade stores, but they all have been exposed to the net in some way. So the aspirations of the non-metro, which is the tier 2 and tier 3 consumer, is actually not very different fundamentally from what is happening in the cities. What is happening is that this person wants to buy the same thing, he wants to live the same lifestyle, and he also does not want to buy a brand which is not good. He aspires to buy the brand, but he probably sometimes requires it in a smaller size, which reduces the ticket size. Just to give you an example, which I was telling Shivnath, I was in Raebareli last week and I was going through stores looking at what they were selling, and it was pleasantly surprising, and it was not for the first time because I have seen it in other tier 3 towns also. So Raebareli is 1.5 lakh turnover. It's actually a large Mofussil town. It's not even a tier 3 town. The A grade stores, and there were at least 10 of them, in terms of the assortment that they were keeping, could have been anywhere in Lucknow. So the retailers told me that we don't keep small packs because we don't want to discount our consumers. The consumers want to buy bigger packs. He had, from our company, he had an assortment of 5 different kind of Shahjal. So coming back to the point, I think that the non-metro story is very similar to the metro story. It's not very different because the consumers have been exposed to the choice. Fundamentally, they will become much more demanding, because today they are less demanding because maybe their buying power is less. But when their buying power goes up, you probably will see a huge explosion, which will take its own due course of time. But there's a lot of optimism.
Right. So interesting that you say that, because it allows me to bring in the point which I was asking all of you in the discussion room, is about the approach of the consumer in the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 city. Does that market segmentation even exist today? Because we are now living in almost a perfect information world. Rakesh ji, your take, because I don't want to put you in a spot, but Kishore ji for the longest time kept on saying India A and India B. But the way information access has led to a democratization of the consumer mindset, if not the buying power.
So I think, when Kishore says India A and India B, that India A and India B still exists. His definition of India A is very simple. People who are consuming. India B are the people who are servicing the needs of India A. Right, and that continues to be the case.
But they're still the consumer. I mean, they may not be.
Of course, they're the consumer, and your desire is the fact that the aspiration of India B also increases. And I can tell you that that is happening, but it's definitely not happening at the speed that you desire it to happen. India has to be consistently growing, and so-called the words that the politicians use, inclusive growth. That inclusive growth is going to make them part of the consumption cycle significantly. What's definitely happening, and what's going to make a huge difference in the next 10 years or so, is the kind of education that is happening in India B, and that's a great story. One can just keep looking around anywhere in the country as you travel, as you meet, irrespective of what income level you have, etc. When it comes to children, everybody seems to be going to a school. And I think that will ultimately make a big difference. It may not. It's going to be a difference in about 10 years from now, but they will be there. I think the A and the B exist almost everywhere in the world, right? There, and in the rest of the world, quite a big chunk of the B is being catered to what we call the category killers, which are getting good products at an unbelievable price. And these people are all about, they definitely need to be and want to consume a lot more, but want it to be at a specific price.
But to come to the whole segmentation, the fact that the non-metro, metro segregation pretty much does not exist, as Rakshit was saying, aspiration levels are same because of the supply of information which has been democratized.
Absolutely, and what is happening very strongly in India is the fact that the migration of youth has to a certain extent slowed down, and people are preferring to stay back in the place they were born because there are enough job opportunities within that place itself, and there are new avenues of doing business which are originating. There are many more ideas in terms of to become an entrepreneur today and not even having a job, and the level of information, the level of exposure, their demands, their needs are rapidly matching the need of the mass segment of the society. Right? Yes, there's still, I think that, when it comes to luxury, it's slightly different even today. But when it comes to the premium and the mass, the tier 2 and tier 3 town is moving so fast and so rapid that it's going to become difficult to differentiate. They're going to be almost the same. It's not the easiest thing. Yes, there are regional preferences and things like that which will continue to remain, but not much. And that's actually great news for us, all of us here, because it makes the marketplace much easier to operate in. Imagine you have an entire nation behaving in the same manner, and an entire nation of millions and millions of people. Every product that you bring in, it's like a huge consumption space available to you.
Right. Nikhil, in your experience, in your genre, or the kind of products you deal with, how's been your experience between different cities? I mean, this whole concept of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or the SEC AB in different market segments. What's been your experience?
No, what I'm learning in a very large way is that, normally everyone keeps his bigger stores in Bombay, Delhi, Pune, whatever. And in tier 2, normally you would keep a smaller shop because the amount of throughput was not matching with whatever you would have in Bombay or Delhi or whatever. I think what the internet has done is that those people were exposed to that offer, were dissatisfied with it, and suddenly the entire unorganized market has got converted into an e-commerce market. Because if you see, it's a price-sensitive market which is happening in India. So my learning is that the larger part of conversion, earlier there used to be e-commerce, but in a different way. You used to tell your aunt in the big city that please buy this for me and send it to me. I would tell my aunt in London, please send something to me. Now this is e-commerce is because you've given him the convenience, and technology allows him to see it on his table. So it's changing, and we have to react to that change. That's basically my understanding. But yes, it's true that I was never able to give the same sort of offer which I was giving in tier 1 to tier 3 or tier 4. So that is changing.
All right. Again, another interesting point for me, because Nikhil keeps referring to the e-commerce space. So let me bring the technology aspect to consumerism. And Rakshit, to begin with you, you're not a big bull in terms of online being a game changer, in terms of profitability or in terms of revenue mix. In your experience, in the last 2 days, we have experienced a lot of this whole online-offline debate and how they are the big, cool thing to happen, just like the way malls were a few years ago, and then different aspects of retail, tier 1, tier 2 was. But now, it seems that somewhere the focus on technology seems to be overtaking the concept of consumerism in the first place. How are you reading the situation from a 1 to 2 year horizon? Because beyond that, nobody can predict.
So if you take a look at the categories where we operate, if you take the example of Tesco Online in the UK, in a developed market, and Tesco Online is probably one of the most successful online selling models being adopted by a retailer. And if you take a look at the food and grocery and personal care segment, even today they don't clock more than 9 to 10% of their sales coming through that model. So, we were internally debating that what will happen for consumer products. Is it true that, there will be a major, huge hype for e-commerce and the brick and retail, the brick and mortar model of retail will suffer negatively? But there are diverging thoughts on this. And what we analyzed was the reason why a consumer shops is also because of price and also because of variety. But there has to be a noticeable difference in the price for him to make a concerted move towards e-commerce. And that happens only at ticket sizes which are above a certain value, which is why, the electronics and the consumer, the televisions and the mobiles, which have a ticket size which is high, where the noticeable difference in the price, which is offline and online, is making people go there. But if you take a look at consumer products that we sell, which are largely sold, say, in the food bazaars and the big bazaars, firstly, the price difference is not significant. Also, what is happening is the sale through e-commerce, in reality, is very minuscule even today. What we believe is that 30 to 40% of the assortment in our categories changes every year. There are innovations, there are renovations, there are new products which come. And the consumer is extremely wary of buying something which is new by only going through e-commerce, even for our kind of categories. And hence, he has basically no choice, but he would want to go and look and feel and experience the product, because seeing is believing. Which would mean that even if he is a shopper on e-commerce, he will not discard the brick and mortar model, but he will definitely go there. The other thing is about consumer experience. The consumer experience and trust that you believe in an offline model, because you tend to believe that what I see is what is real and what I buy, makes a big impact. You will have your group of people, and some of the researchers suggest that there will be a lot more of these people who are born after 1995, because they've been on the internet since the time, they became aware of the senses when they were 7 or 8 years old. And these people will start becoming first-time wage earners and these kind of things in 2018 and 2019. We have to see what happens, but 2018-19 is still 3-4 years away. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that there would be, even today, a small set of people who do the routine purchase simply because of convenience, largely limited to the metros, double income working couples, who have to leave home before 8 a.m. or they come only after 9 p.m. But overall, the talk about e-commerce making a dent in the consumer basket from a home and personal care segment is more hype as of today, if you compare with real transactions which are happening. So obviously the imagery of that market is bigger. How that market evolves is very interesting. It will definitely grow, but whether it can displace the brick and mortar model is a separate issue, which seems to be a challenge, because going ahead, which is not a part of this question, you will have specialization which will come in, which will mean that consumers will want to go offline for much more informed choices, which are, much, much specialized.
Interesting that you say that, and I wish you were there in the first session where Rakeshji was also there, and hence I shall come back to you, Mr. Biani, and look at the trends of this whole e-commerce space. For a lot of people who don't know, I guess, if I can quote the figure, you do about 350 crores and a profitable online business at that. It's a small, minuscule, but it will grow in leaps and bounds. My question to you is though, while online is about some way perception, it's a bit of what this whole private equity money chasing them and valuations happening. Eventually, if it is about profitability, give us a sense of or a perspective of scale and size in that, without quoting numbers if you don't want to.
See, I think let's think of the customer. I think this whole session is about the consumer, and we'll keep profitability aside. And you think about it, just thinking through about experience of shopping, and you think through about why do you go to a retail store, and you go to a retail store and you have all these shirts on display, you have all these colors on display, and there's an impulse that gets created, there's a visualization that's happened, there's visual merchandising which is happening, there is experience design which is happening, there are mannequins to influence you, there's an environment which gets created. All of these are part and parcel of a theater called retail store. And people like us are even continuously looking at evolving and investing in a theater. Right? Because we believe the fact that if there's no theater, there's not going to be any shopping. Online is something, what will you go and shop online is where you have specifications in place, where you have a standard grocery list kind of a thing. Well, that's what I wish to buy, that's a specific thing. I have made up my mind, I have a replenishment order coming through, I don't have the time, you go and do it. But isn't it very boring at the end of the day? You can just see one product at a time, right?
While discussing this, a different colleague of mine asked the following questions. Can you feel the product? Can you smell the product? Can you taste the product? So obviously she was an extreme votary of shopping offline. But they made a very interesting statement, is that imagine if you have to consume 2,000 calories during the course of a day, and you had a choice of eating 3 tablets of 600 calories each, which would do the job equally as food, and you will take less time, as compared to having 3 proper meals, with the taste and the fragrance and the flavor. What would you choose?
That's a bit unfair. I mean, come on, that's a bit unfair.
Which is why I said she was a big votary of the offline model, but this is how somebody tried to define.
That's a bit unfair, and I can put forward my argument, but I'll come back to that point. Hold on to that thought.
See, what is exciting us is that every 3 days we read a story in the newspaper which says 2.4 seconds and 4.1 seconds and 20,000 units and 40,000 units of a certain mobile phone got sold, and we think that the whole country is shopping there. I'll tell you one thing, okay, is the fact that what is that mobile phone and why people are greedy about that mobile phone. This is this company called Xiaomi, right? And every single review that you'll see on that product, it claims to be the fact that the products are being sold at half the price of what an equivalent model is sold for. And people think the fact that it's an unbelievable deal and I must get it for myself. Right? That is what is happening. Because there are significant amount of expert reviews which are available. That the 13,999 phone, spec-wise, any equivalent Samsung product is actually priced at 29,000. At the same time, there were other exclusive deals which also happened. There was this product called Samsung Galaxy Zoom X or K that was also sold exclusively only online by Samsung on Amazon. And it actually bombed, right? And it bombed because at 29,000 rupees, it was at par with the market price, and people said, what's so great about it? So the greed is only what is making people shop more often, okay? And then there is, of course, there is a certain amount of convenience factor of a very specific need. I do shop online at times because I have made up my mind. I'm kind of so finicky about certain things that I require. It must have this, it must have this, it must have this, and all those parameters, filtration has to be done. I can go to 10 stores out here and maybe I won't find it. So I just end up shopping some of that stuff online. But when it comes to buying my own clothing, if I don't touch, feel, there's a wash effect, what is the length onto it, how does it fit onto me, how will I ever go and shop? I want to buy a perfume, and now I'm in the marketplace trying to find a new fragrance. Exactly, unless we're going to come up with a technology in the next few years where every kind of a smell can also be passed through.
Well, you never know.
You never know.
That's the
right?
question. If you never know, you'll have to adapt to that. I mean,
either we'll all become dull and we complain to ourselves the fact that the only thing that we were doing was, we are seeing television. Now we'll say, okay, the only thing that we're doing is watching internet, and clicking the mouse. Click.
I don't know if this lady is here who was in one of my previous sessions, and she spends 4 days a week online. She said, I spend 4 days a week online and I don't have enough customer experience online, and hence the retail. But didn't stop her from saying, I wouldn't mind if the brand actually gives me a better experience online for me to buy online. Go ahead, sorry, Nikhil.
I think I'll define this in a slightly different way. He said to us, retail is the theater for consumption. Okay. But I think he's given the answer, and it's quite simple, that things which are only price sensitive, which is a very large part of the Indian market, so it's a big danger for us also. Things which are only price sensitive and which are your regular needs, which you don't need to go to the market and define, might go to the internet. See, what is happening today is India is going from unorganized to organized. Now, whether it is getting organized through e-commerce or through physical retail, it is getting organized. So what we were 5-7%, if you combine e-commerce and physical retail, we might be at 15% now. So e-commerce today is taking a much faster share, and there are categories which have actually disappeared from physical stores. And we have to keep that in mind for the future. So the theater is, I actually picked it up from him, and I think it's a beautiful word. So products which need theater will continue to thrive in a beautiful world. And the products which don't need theater, which you have established, you want one white, black t-shirt, people might not go to the normal store for a black t-shirt.
Well, everybody needs a black car. I understand that concept, and there used to be this whole thing.
So while, let's go back to 15th August, which is that huge promo that Big Bazaar does. And in all probability, maybe the deal on online marketplaces was even cheaper than what Big Bazaar had.
But you played the same game.
Yeah, that's because there was a theater which was happening inside that store, and the theater was not only conducted by me, but by all the millions of customers who walked into that store. Right? People love that effect also. People want to meet other people. People want to see what others are buying because they believe that's also an influencing factor.
All right. So we'll leave that debate open in it, because I don't think there's a victor or a loser here, because I think it's best, at least whatever I've little learned, is never to predict technology. And I will not get there, but I still think it's an important factor. And the calorie debate, by the way, for those who don't have time, you never know, maybe that's what they want to do. Hence, let's go to the next phase of retail, and I want to ask all of you, maybe I'll start with you, Nikhil, is about scaling up, making an Indian brand global, retuning your facilities, retuning your labor force, scale and size. How much of a challenge is that even today? Because sometimes I feel this whole demographic dividend everybody talks about is more like a demographic disaster because of lack of training, lack of the right labor pool. There is an issue there. How are you reading the situation?
You need to understand that retail had its own challenges in India. Retail pricing was, if you see the evolution of retail in European and American markets, they used to have the small store, the concept of the 1,000 square feet and 1,500 square feet store. As it evolved over 2 decades, the 1,500 square feet store disappeared. And they were the same concepts who were there either became successful and became 20,000 square feet stores, single brand, or they went out of the market. India has not seen that. So basically what's happened is we've evolved simultaneously along with technology. And even though, there was a demand for 600 malls in this country at one point of time, if you talk about 85% organized, then the amount of retail space which you need is ridiculously high. I believe that space is going to get reduced now because there will be different mediums to sell the same product. And you could be in a very, very different scenario in the future. And that's why I believe that we'll have to wait and watch.
Wait and watch.
How to evolve your strategy.
Rakshit, in your sense, the way the so-called raw materials of business, which labor is an integral part of it, Is there a limitation to scaling and sizing of the business in India?
No, it is not. But if you take a look at the labor pool, and if you take a look at retail, and I've also worked in a retail company in the past, the big challenge is the kind of retail staff that you want. Firstly, training is something on which a lot of companies don't invest in the right way. Because one of the big things that could make a difference in retail between one chain to the other or one store to the other is consumer experience. And if you don't focus on consumer experience, which can come only because of training, you will have a challenge. Training, in fact, training for retail should be treated like an education business. And unless you treat that like an education business, you will always have a labor shortage where you're looking at people doing low value jobs, and for them to change over and move to a different industry because they're earning 2,000 rupees more is always going to be available, and that will always leave you with a shortage. So, we have plenty of people. There is no shortage. I think what is required for making retail more smoother and easier so that all these people also have some kind of a career graph is to treat it more like the ITI education and give them the skills, which is both the soft skill and the numerical skill and the etiquette skill and product knowledge and information. So many times you meet retail people who are selling product where you require some information. You ask them a tier 2 question behind their SOP and the 5 standard answers that they know. They will say, can I get back to you? Can I ask somebody else? So I think
there is an issue. I mean, there's an issue which needs to be said.
There is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay, Rakesh, in that context, when will we see the next big Indian global brand in some ways? And what are the limiting factors to that? And the second part, which I want to ask you about, urbanization or the quality of urbanization being the limiting factor for retail to grow in India.
So, actually the wrong guy to ask, will India create a global brand? Because we as a company believe only in India, very focused only expanding in India. We look at the fact that the whole world wants to come here, and why will I want to go outside? When the world sees an opportunity or I'll see an opportunity somewhere else, probability no. I think I must work harder and harder to create better and better brands just to cater to the ever-growing Indian consumption space. Yeah. So that is where our focus is, and I think that's enough. I think at times we become I don't think so. When you think about most of the China brand, China is currently a good topic to talk about. Did the Huawei's of the world, did the ZTEs of the world, to go overseas in the first 10 years or 15 years. I think they really worked hard. They really got the product right. They got the technology right. They got the research right. And when they thought the fact that this is in place, that's when we've gone overseas. Mind-boggling consumption happening within China. The Chinese brands are doing extremely well. Not all of them have gone overseas till date. First, they have become $1 billion, $2 billion within their own country, very well accepted out there. I'm sure they're all now that they're trying to go there. But I think brand building is a very different case. The West knows it extremely well. They've been doing it very consistently. This would happen one day, but there is more than enough time to do it. I think become a superpower within your own nation first, and then think about the rest of the world. That's the way I would look at it. On the second side, urbanization, unless I think if we are serious about our growth story, we need a new quality of urbanization to happen in India. And that's where I would believe the fact that there's so-called the smart cities as a kind of concept which is coming in. But this is like a stunning amount of change that we are expecting. Every one of us feels so frustrated, when even the basics of the things which can be resolved are not there and not right when you're on the roads of the city or any city in India. So there has to be a plan to urbanization. Today, shopping is not even a part of the urban master plan in Mumbai. Right? The kind of spaces allocated in Delhi in the master plan for shopping is ridiculously low compared to the demand that exists. And that's the reason there's a complete mismatch between price and the availability. So unless and until there's abundance which gets created, and master plans accept the fact that if India has to grow, India has to consume a lot more, consumption will lead to more tax collection, consumption will lead to more job creation, master plans have to incorporate proper high streets, oblique malls as destinations which are integrated in the transportations, etc., etc. That's how the world has done it very well, and that's the reason what you see as a marketplace that has evolved there. I just hope someday somebody will rise. I don't expect the Prime Minister of the country to solve it, but every state chief minister must take it as an onus to do this.
In fact, that's a good suggestion for Amitabh and IRF is to look at town planning as an interesting aspect of retail. I think that's one part of the session missing. I see a lot of real estate guys talking about mall development, but I don't see many urban town planners or a BMC head sitting here and telling us how that's going to, and maybe they will not even come here. But very quickly, one quick word, if we can take some questions after that, and maybe IRF guys can tell me if the time management is okay. Rakshit, starting with you very quickly. The financial viability of the retail business, everybody says, I'm an entrepreneur, how much money should I put on my own? Is it really worth my, personal savings to going into it? Do you see the exchange between financial institutions and retail entrepreneurs or retail brands? Is that relationship a crucial factor in the way retail is going to grow in the country?
That is a crucial factor because if you're going to be setting up retail, you need to have access to capital and you need to have access to capital which is rightly priced. One of the challenges in our retailing model, because of the way our towns have been planned, is that the rental that you pay as compared to an international model is significantly higher. If you look at the whole profit and loss or a store EBITDA and how does it drop in, it's quite evident that in India you are paying a disproportionate price for hiring space. You pay a slightly lower price for people as compared to what you would pay in the West. But then you can also get in a lot of efficiencies by having lesser number of people because the number of the labor efficiency usually in Indian stores is low as compared to outside. Any financial institution, which is going to look at your viability is also going to challenge in terms of how do you have an innovative capex model. Because the capex that you put in a retail store is not permanent capex because after 3 or 4 years you will have to get into refurbishment. So the life of that capex that you put is going to dry out and you will have to invest up to maybe 30 to 40 to 50 and in some high experience models maybe at least 70 product or service offering, the capex that you are putting in and the customer acquisition. If you have all three of these ideas taped in well and if you have proof of concept by virtue of a few stores or a few small cities which have been test marketed working well, I think there are enough people to give you money.
Nikhil, very quickly, your thoughts on that?
Need of capital is supreme. And, the way, if you see all the industries moving forward, till you don't provide it enough capital at the right price, you can't see growth. And one of the biggest reasons why, what is going to be the biggest challenge for retail growth, in 2007 when we used to come to these conferences, the amount of investment going into retail infrastructure was almost $5 billion or $6 billion in terms of retail and retail infrastructure, land, the building which was being made on it, everything, fit outs, everything. If I talk about the next 2 years, I don't think there's even $1 billion going into this industry. And if you don't invest $1 billion into an industry, you can't expect some marvelous results.
Rakeshji, your closing comments on the financial aspect of business.
So I think if you're talking about somebody trying to build a business now, finance flows only if you have a concept which is strong, connects with the consumer, and you have a commitment that you are going to build it consistently, right? And that will make the product so strong enough that it will connect with the customer and automatically people are willing to, because you will have a profitable model then, and that's when people finance you. If you don't have a profitable model, nobody's going to finance. That's the problem. Yes, I think this country deserves, we need to get more businesses, we need to get more brands in place. The last few years have not been the best to raise money. Raising equity is a very difficult task in India. Raising private equity is definitely not the most easiest one also. And banks are very expensive, especially for startups. So I think the government recognizes that, and thus when we had a 10,000 crore private equity kind of a new startup investment plan which has been put in place. I think that's a small number, but it's a good beginning. It's a recognition of the fact that we need to make new businesses in India, and we must look at the entrepreneurial skills that exist in India and encourage them to make businesses here.
Interesting, because at the end of the day, you need money to make money eventually, and that's what is important. Quickly, a couple of questions, if anybody has from the audience to this panel. Anyone? Anyone with questions for this panel about the future of retail? All right, great. So we can easily conclude. So one line answers, Rakshit, starting with you. We've just begun. It so seems. We've just begun on the... Huh? No. I need one line closure for you. Next year when we come back at the IRF, where do you think the theme would have shifted to between online, offline debate, which is the biggest theme right now? Give me one prediction for the next 1 year.
Achhe din are here for both offline and online.
Achhe din, okay. Nikhil,
It'll remain the same. Show me the money.
Rakesh ji,
I think we're going to be talking about growth, and we're talking about who's growing faster and who's getting his act together. This is the era for growth is here. That is definitely the case. And I think if you're not growing, you need to introspect yourself. But this country is ready for growth.
all right. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us on the panel, and a round of applause for Rakesh Biyani, Rakshit, as well as Nikhil Chaturvedi. We are into our last session now with a presentation by Krish Iyer, who will be joining us from Walmart. That's the last session, after which at 7 o'clock we move to the hangar for the grand finale with Kishore Biyani in a chat with Shelly Chopra. Thank you all for joining us. We are ready for the next session. Thank you all for being here.